Welcome to Season 8 of the award-winning Retail Tea Break podcast. My name is Melissa Moore, the Retail Advisor, and each week I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers and brands to dispel the myths, share their knowledge and give you an insight into the retail industry. Listen back to previous seasons on your favourite podcast platform, and while you're there, please do hit that follow button so you get to listen first every week. Watch us over on YouTube and subscribe to the Retail Advisor because you've no idea how useful it is to ensure that I can keep bringing you the content that you love. And remember, sharing is caring in the retail industry. Share an episode across any of your platforms with your network. And if you're on social media, tag me, Melissa Moore, and the Retail Tea Break podcast. In the meantime, grab that cup of tea, sit back and listen in to Season 8 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. A huge thank you before you go to our sponsor, International Retail Magazine. You'll find a link to the latest copy in the show notes. Each issue of International Retail is jam-packed with strategies that you can use immediately from the brightest minds in retail, just for you. With the latest news and trends that are impacting your retail business, articles from retail leaders in the field, Q&As with global retail moguls, training tips for your frontline sales associates, and attention-grabbing cover stories from brands and CEOs that you know and love. Head over to irg-retail.com and subscribe today to your free copy of the latest issue of International Retail Magazine. Today, I'm joined by a storyteller who is the driving force behind the future skills needed in the retail industry. As a founder and the CEO of Customer Service Excellence Ireland, the mission is clear: to elevate service standards in an era where outstanding customer experience is paramount. His expertise in customer relations and new business development has been instrumental in advancing service excellence across various industries. The competencies honed in hospitality, retail, and light industry have enabled the creation of initiatives that significantly enhance customer engagement and drive sales growth. In addition, today's guest has created the exciting Human Skills Institute, where he and the team design and deliver modules of learning for the key human skills required in the workplace and in society. Charlie Boyle, storytelling legend and author of The Future is Human, welcome to the Retail Tea Break podcast.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you for having me on this morning.
I am thrilled to be able to have this chat. I suppose celebrating the 100th episode of the Retail Tea Break podcast is massive. And I knew it had to be a special one. So I suppose no better person than the man who supported me over the last kind of 5-6 years within the retail and people part of this industry. So really excited. But look, to kick us off then, in the age-old tradition of the Retail Tea Break podcast, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, which I am told is about 2 minutes, and I'm sure it is up there in Donegal, tell us a little bit more about you and your background in the industry.
Well, we're still boiling hot water in the big pans on the fire, so I'm allowed 4 or 5 minutes. No, I'll keep to the brief. So yeah, I was born in the United States. You won't pick that up in the accent. So locally, I would be known as Charlie the Yank because there was about 5 Charlie Boyles in my local area. So you had a Charlie from Glasgow and you had a Charlie the Yank, and that stuck, and it's with my grandchildren at this stage. And academically, I went straight into the world of work from secondary school, as did 70-80% of those I was at school with at that stage. When you think of the change of that, I think it's 89% going to third level now. Straight into the world of work, and wherever there was work of any kind, I kind of went after it. And then I fell in, I suppose, to hospitality and the pub sector quite late on. You know, I was about 30 at the time, and I ended up in the UK working for O'Neill's Irish Pubs for quite a few years, but in that pub sector in London for around 15 years, mostly managing pubs or groups of pubs for large companies like Bass, Mitchells and Butler, O'Neill's, Barracuda, Chain, etc. And really enjoyed doing that, really enjoyed managing people. You know, I wasn't a publican as such, I was more managing people who were managing the pubs, and just fascinated about, you know, why people came to certain pubs and, you know, what they were looking for, trying to satisfy that, but mostly working internally, working at the team, working with the staff. And I wasn't really doing it off any template. I was doing it because I thought it the right thing to do, you know, look after your staff look after the customer. But, you know, I wasn't being crazy about it. I wasn't overpaying them, you know, but if I felt that somebody needed a pathway to progression, you know, I would create that for them. And our sales were always good, and I could never really figure out what sort of, you know, why that was the case. And I was later to go back and study that. So went into a bit of an academic phase then where I studied a master's quite late in life in my 50s and came back from London and created Customer Service Excellence Ireland over 11 years ago. And I suppose there as well, it's not just customer service at the front of house, which is important, but it's looking at the culture within the organization, the internal customer service, and how important that is, because the customer is only going to get a replication of what it's like internally. And that probably takes me up to speed before the up to speed in terms of the book. And I wanted to write a book after the masters. I didn't know where I wanted to go with that study. I wanted to perhaps maybe look at further study into what are the skills of the future, why are human skills not being given the place they deserve, and all the academics that I had gone to, because I had a crazy idea to do a PhD, which wouldn't have suited me, if I'm honest. I wouldn't have had the discipline to do that. So I was advised to write a book and to get it down in a book. So the book is about 20 chapters. Each chapter is a human skill, but it also involves local people that I would have known in my own area in West Donegal and the inspiration that they would have given. So sometimes the great leadership is right under your feet. You don't have to look for the Mandelas or the great leaders of the world. They can be in your community. They could be in your house, really. So that's about it, Melissa.
That's fantastic. And actually, look, you've mentioned the book there. You've jumped my kind of traditional next question to authors out there. The book, we kind of can see the artwork behind you there. The Future is Human, coming out now in a few weeks. It is an incredible book. I've been very lucky to have a cheeky sneak and read the whole thing. It's unbelievable. But actually, I think it kind of really brings together so much of what you said there, but also it's written in such a way that it's an easy read, which is very much how you deliver training. It's how very much you speak to people. You're on their level all the time, giving them examples that are easy to understand. Take me through the kind of way it's written, because it's almost story based from chapter to chapter.
Yeah, it is. As I say, each of the chapters has a heading. It could be connecting through storytelling, which I know is one of the chapters. And although I'll explain the importance of connecting through storytelling from a global perspective, I would quickly go on to the next section, which is then called Closer to Home. And Closer to Home ends up being my godfather, my uncle, may he rest in peace, Murray Boyle, who died now about probably 8 years ago. But my uncle Murray lived in New York, although he was born in West Donegal. He was a great storyteller. We would tell stories of West Donegal. Didn't mean all those stories were true, which I found out later on, and that was a great disappointment. I found out in my adult life that he was never in Tory Island, for example, and he would tell me about the boat trips he would have out and from Tory Island. So, but he was great. He was great connecting through storytelling, and you would listen to him. And if he was telling a story about work, he was involved in union. He was a union manager out in New York. But everything he'd done tended to have a story behind it. Wait till I tell you about a man that came up here and he was building, this building on Madison Avenue. And you got the information from him through storytelling. Now, I didn't know that at the time, but retrospectively, when I studied the power of storytelling, I thought, wow, my Uncle Murray was doing that. He didn't know he was doing that. So each of the chapters are sort of like that. There's one on resilience, about coming back from something terrible that happened. And in that case, a really good friend, Alana Conahan, and this is quite dramatic. I know she actually watched her mother be murdered in front of her, and that's obviously traumatic. But the resilience of coming back from that, and she's fantastic mother, a fantastic friend to so many, but she went through a lot of trauma, and I think it's important to pass on resilience and what resilience is and how it's needed, and helping young people to understand these key human skills, because they're perhaps not being as exposed to them as maybe my generation or indeed your own. Yeah.
It's such an interesting read in that respect. As you said, these powerful stories really kind of framing some of these core skills, which, as you say, They are lacking. Let's call a spade out there. We know that there's a whole section of society now who maybe don't want to, maybe don't know how to communicate, or work as a team or have that resilience, which I think maybe to the likes of you and I were almost bet into us as children. And you develop and you hone them and you surround yourself with people as well that have those skills. If people nowadays don't have them, is it excluding them from the workforce? And therefore, because retail itself, especially physical retail, needs people with that human connection, needs to be able to communicate, to talk to people, to smile at people, to listen, to empathize with people. Where does that leave us now?
Well, yeah, and the research, I suppose, in the book, what we explain as well, I was very, very lucky a few years ago to, and I must say, we sort of pushed our way into the study with MIT, myself and Oren, and you could imagine the two characters going out to Boston and going into Cambridge, which is just across the river. We had a really good connection in MIT. MIT, if you Google it, is probably definitely the top three, one of the top three universities in the world. And for research like this here, I would believe it to be the best. But we were very lucky to get involved in a study they were doing of the future of work. Now, Oren Doherty had led out with Rushing Woods a fantastic paper around 2021 looking at technology, the skills of technology in the retail place. I was more interested in the human skills and the research that MIT had carried out, and we continued, or my company CSEI had continued here, suggests that in retail, about 35% of it is product knowledge. So you don't need to be the expert you needed to be 30, 40 years ago, because the customer is coming in with a lot of the information anyway. Because if I'm going to a retailer tomorrow to buy trainers, I'm going to do that research the night before, because since the smartphone of 2010, I can now do that. So if you're working in that retailer, you have no chance against me as a customer, really. So product knowledge, you need to have around 35%, it would be suggested from the research. Digital skills, although we live in a digitally disrupted world, somebody working in retail, even at management level, only needs about 15% of their skills to be digital, because the digital changes so often is that you need to know what devices you're using, payment methods, etc. And that leaves 50% plus of the skills that are required are still human skills. But the anomaly in all of that is, or the contradiction is, that's not what we're training. And in
Mm,
each of the sectors that we looked at 11 sectors: light engineering, tourism, hospitality, retail, education, financial services. Some of them were higher than 50%, but the average is around 52% of the skills of the future are going to be human skills. Now, with retail, there's a great opportunity there, because it probably links in, Melissa, with the experience economy. We are still in the experience economy, where we will pay extra for better experiences. We will pay a premium if the experience is good. We're finding this all the time. Not always, but a lot of the time, that's what will happen. But a big part that feeds that experience economy is that emotional connection. So cross-cultural understanding different cultures, understanding different generations, effective communication, emotional intelligence, compassion, empathy. Here are human skills that we no longer can just hope that the person
mm.
working in retail will have, but we can in fact raise their awareness and train it in and make it a key measurement. So it's not somebody necessarily coming into retail that has experience in retail, but are they good with their human skills? Are they able to connect? And even other things like growth mindset, vision and values creation, design thinking. All of those things are of huge importance, but they're all human skills. I think for too long we call them soft skills. If we call them soft, they tend to get treated soft, and we then tend to think, oh, they're not important.
Yeah.
These key human skills, I would believe, and the research is supports it. It's just so important. And if I can just give you one example, in the last couple of years, we wrote up a module on how to have a difficult conversation, and the demand for that is quite high, which would suggest is that perhaps our younger generations shy away from having difficult conversations, both as staff members and as managers. And of course, the problem is if you don't have that difficult conversation, it becomes even more difficult. And then somebody leaves, doesn't give an explanation, and perhaps sends back, a 2-page email to the manager of how unhappy they've been or had been for the last year. So we felt that we had to write, a module for our training with the human skills on having difficult conversations. And it's not difficult to have a difficult conversation. It's more difficult to leave it because that causes stress and sleepless nights. But it's a human skill that's well worth looking at.
Absolutely. And actually, even on that, that's difficult for maybe the two people having the conversation. But as you said, if that festers, you then have an infected team. And like we've all worked for those teams over the years where there's bad feeling, it's not nice to go to work. That's when people leave. This is where the kind of, I think, the retention issue comes into play in retail. But of course, as you said right back at the beginning, if the culture's not there internally, the customer sees it. They really see it and they feel it and they know something's wrong.
Yeah, that's right. And not all the time will they know it's wrong, but I think we all sort of we sense that in the positive and the negative, either in a retail setting or indeed any setting, that, if it's not right at the front, it means that it's not right deeper down. And if it's right at the front, and if you can sense that sort of that vibration of staff getting on well and being helpful and being attentive and being proactive and watching out for customers walking down the aisle to make sure that they're able to make an intervention if they feel that that customer needs help, you kind of know that this is led from something much deeper. If you open the bonnet and look under, the engine's going to be in good shape. And that is that internal piece. The culture is so, so important. And very often what we do is we'll maybe talk too much about a digital strategy or a workplace strategy, but we don't look at the culture. And it's maybe at times maybe we don't understand or we get confused by culture, but it can be simplified. It always goes back to these key human skills.
And you know what? One that really stands out to me that I know we've spoken a lot about over the last few years, recognition. It doesn't happen in an awful lot of retail companies, unfortunately. And we're not just talking about the money aspect, getting paid to do a job or getting the odd bonus at Christmas is fantastic. But actually, that day-to-day recognition, because you've fostered a culture that's really positive, is so important to people.
Very much so, yeah. And look at it's a subject that I could talk for half a day at very least. I think it's so, so important. And it's free to management. Recognition is not reward, it's not payment. Sometimes if we bring up recognition, how do you recognize your staff? When things are tough, and when payment is difficult, and the biggest cost that all retailers have is, staff costs. When something is free, like recognition, and when managers and supervisors and senior staff members realize the power of recognition, catching people in, saying well done, very, very simple, ways to do that. And it's such a powerful tool, and it's one that we certainly don't use enough. And there's so much research, I suppose, in recent years on the whole area of recognition. And then it sometimes can be seen as a cultural norm in certain countries. And Ireland and the UK could be better at it. I think it's maybe moving slightly in the right direction there. And compared to other places, and I'd probably pick like the United States, where they'll easily say good job or high five, and maybe sometimes people feel that's a bit overplayed. But if we had a sort of mid-Atlantic sort of version of that, we would be much better off, rather than when somebody does something really well in a retail setting, or when somebody, a staff member treats a customer really well, and you can see the satisfaction in that customer, the customer passes on that, to another manager, making sure that we're making a song and dance about that in the appropriate way. We need to be careful about it as well, because sometimes staff are quite private about that, but that's part of management's job to recognize and to catch people on.
And then from something I suppose that's underplayed recognition in retail right now to something that's and forgive me for saying it's probably overplayed, but it's all anyone's talking about. AI. Is there a place, do you think, for AI and human skills? Like, could it play a part?
Yeah, definitely. And if you asked me that question probably about 3 years ago, I would have seen AI as the enemy of human
Mm,
skills. But I don't, I really, really don't see that now, because I think with AI, we have to embrace AI. It's gone past that stage now. And what we have to do is we have to accept that, for example, if I want any information about anything to do with retail, the chances are that I can get that information within what, 3, 4 minutes.
hmm
If I want to write up a report about retail, which in the past would have taken me 3 or 4 weeks of my time to do so, using the right AI tools, I can do that in 3 hours. So AI is phenomenal. There's no question about that. And I think what that does, it is what AI is going to be able to do in retail. It's going to be able to release humans to do what humans do best, and that's the human touch. So it's going to be able to release them to be better connectors with other humans, with other customers, but with the right training, with the right human skills, with the right, teamwork, collaboration, compassion, empathy, all of those items. So AI will do the tasks that tie us up as humans. You don't want to be locked in an office for 3 weeks writing a report, or, locked in an office doing something that previously took 8 hours, when perhaps you are the strongest person with the strongest set of human skills, that being out motivating your team and being out communicating with your customers is really where you want to be. So the battleground for the hearts and minds of the customers in retail will be in that customer experience, but that customer experience is going to be the emotional side of it. So I think AI is just a progression from the other technologies that we've had in the past, as long as it's honest AI, as long as it's authentic, as long as we're not mixing it up. But I think it's going to release humans into the area where they perform the best.
That's really lovely to hear. And I think I absolutely agree with that. We need to allow our people to do what they do best. And that is as well to meet with each other and to meet with the customer. So we think that the human connection obviously has to be face to face, even if it's the way we are now, kind of using tech. So again, very much in the physical retail sense. But I'm fascinated then, do you think that it can also relate to the modern way of shopping, be that online, be that kind of social commerce? Do you think there's room for kind of human skills and a human connection there as well?
Yeah, without question. And I think that's one of the great challenges, is that even in the online or the omni-channel ways that we're shopping in retail, how do we make that as human as possible? Now that is the great challenge, and I have to, and I'm not here to promote the company that I'm going to mention, but very often I'll buy books on Amazon, and I find that to have be a human connection. I've never met anybody from Amazon. I've never met Mary, who works in Amazon. But I honestly believe that when I go on to Amazon, that they're talking to me because my account is there. And yeah, I fall into the trap of somebody who bought this book also bought such and such a book, and it identifies a book that I didn't intend to buy, but it's one that they know that I'm interested in. So there's AI at play there. I know there's AI at play, but then, I'll pay for the book. It already has my credit card. I press a button, and 2 days later, the book is at my door. Now, I don't always do that, because I also like going into bookshops and talking to people in the bookshops and sitting down and maybe reading half the book and then deciding, right, I've read enough of it now. I'm going to take this book with me. I'm going to buy the book. I like that experience as well. But, I suppose that's a blended approach to it. If I get excited about a book when I'm sitting at home, chatting to Tony, my wife, or she mentions there's a book out, I'll buy it. I'll buy it online. But it's going to tell me when it was delivered. It's going to tell me it's in the docks in Liverpool. It's going to tell me it's going to be there on Friday. And then it comes on Thursday, and then I open it, and it's got this new sort of experiential thing that you pull off it, and I get all excited, and and there's an experience there, and there's a human touch to it as well. Now, some people might think, oh, that's crazy. That's just a good system. But we need to become better and better at that. What's the follow on to that? Is the follow on to that, Charlie, I see your book has arrived. I hope you enjoy reading it and we'll talk to you soon. Something like that, because there's no question that when we look at these 6 pillars of customer experience, one of them is time and effort. We want things quickly. We want less effort, not more. We want less effort. So if we turn that around then into bricks and mortar, when we do go shopping, when we go to shopping centres, it must be seamless. The parking must be easy. The access to the shops must be easy. The toilets must be of the highest standard possible, 5-star toilet standards. But the most important element of that is the interaction with the staff on a human basis. So when we go into the shops, that it is an engagement, that you do sense this feeling of welcome. And that's the human skills. That's what we're going to leave with. Subconsciously, we are drawn back to places where we felt good. It's not price, it's not product, although they are hugely important elements, but it's how did they make me feel. So if there was friction, or let's say I'm a regular customer to a store and the lifetime value of me as a customer, because we've done a lot of work on this here, trying to create the lifetime value of a customer. One retailer I was talking to this week, 72,000 is the lifetime value of the customer to them. So that 72,000 asset, who's also a human, doesn't want to fall out with you over €5 of a purchase. So if they say that it's not working, it's not working. Just give them something. So that frictionless human interaction must be better time and time again. And therefore, the emphasis is on human connection and human skills for the training of staff. Are we doing that at the proportion that we need to? I don't believe we are. So, hence the name of the book, The Future is Human. Don't miss the importance of the human touch.
Oh, I fully agree. And I'm sitting here like a nodding dog, absolutely agreeing with everything you've just said. And what's fascinating to me is it really starts to tie in with something we've been talking about so much on this podcast over the last 3.5 years. As I say, this is episode 100. Many listeners will remember Chris Igwe, Linda Johansson James, both talking about this idea of, the lifetime value of the customer, but also Chris, like you, Charlie, a massive fan of clean toilets. It's such an integral part of the shopping experience that no one talks about publicly. But actually, if you were to ask people, is it something that they think about when they go shopping? Absolutely. It's just key. But also coming back then to your Amazon point, it's really interesting that that's the one you picked up. That hyper personalization of service is something we all crave, we all want in this day and age. And I love the fact that actually you jump between the two, which to me is really normal as a shopper now. As you say, you'll go online when you need to. You'll also go and visit physical stores and speak to people if you want that really gorgeous luxury experience of physically holding the book. But on top of that, then the how post-purchase experience has become so important to all of us. And I do think retailers forget about that. But that to me, then, and I'd never thought about it this way, post purchase is the ideal time to leave the customer with that lasting impression of the human connection. As you said, the follow up, the gentle chat, the gentle email, whatever it might be, just to check in with them.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it is so important. And it's funny, in the car industry, which we're doing work at the minute, they've put a huge emphasis on what happens after the car is purchased. So the car is purchased. Sometimes they've been accused of not having that after sales excellence that was there when you were buying the car. And that is just checking in maybe with the customer 2-3 weeks after the purchase in some way or form. It could be done digitally, it could be done personally if the time was there to do so. But it's just wherever we can make that human connection. And even for independents, and there's a lot of really, really good independents out there who have survived crisis after crisis, and they're still there. Going back to that thing of, are they telling their story? Because people will buy the story. They will buy the story of, you know, here in West Donegal, I suppose the tweed manufacturers are still doing really well. We've got McGee who are still doing well, but people are there for the story. What's the story of the family now in its third generation? What's the story of the hundreds of people that they employed in rural areas? Connecting through the storytelling, and that's the same for large companies as well. I mean, Guinness, another great example. So these iconic brands are telling their story, and one of the questions I suppose we're asking: are you telling your story? Is your story being told?
And is it authentic? I think is really the thing to add there. So especially like McGee is stunning. What they do is incredible, but that's why they're connecting. They're still selling these same incredible, beautiful pieces. They have been for years. Yes, with a modern twist, but it's authentic. The experience, if you go into their stores, is authentic. Online, it just, as you said, spreads that love for the brand and that heritage too.
That's right. Yeah, and it's. I think another one at the minute is one that we've been doing probably a lot of work on is sustainability awareness. Awareness that sustainability is not just about the land and about the sea and about the recycling. All of those elements of huge importance, but within retail, are we looking at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals? Equality, equality of education, pathways for those working within retail. I think that's of huge importance. And the likes of Retail Ireland, SkillNet do fantastic work, and you, of course, are part of that. So that sustainability awareness piece, making sure that communities are sustainable, and for retail, how are they spending their profits? Because people now want to know, what are you about? If we take, for example, and again, I'm not highlighting these companies, but they're involved recently in the retail apprenticeship. McDonald's do tremendous work in
Mm.
Ireland for Ronald McDonald House. Sometimes it's understated. And the reason that it's understated, if it became too popular, the demand for it would not be able to keep up with, or the supply of rooms for the families of sick children in Dublin wouldn't be able to keep up with the demand for it. But when you hear of the story, when you hear of the story of Ronald McDonald House, which is really the story of McDonald's in Ireland, that can be a very strong story. That can be a story that can pull somebody in to use their service and buy their products because they're telling that story. And that is authentic. Even though people might be cynical and think, oh, well, it's McDonald's, they can well afford it. When you hear the story told, as we did by the apprentices in class recently in Dublin, it's really, really profound. The what impact it has. So retailers must look at the social impact in their community and look at where can they make the society that we all live in better and the communities that we live in better. And they now have that responsibility. And that's interesting as well. So that sustainability awareness piece is something we're also working on.
And I love that. It really starts to bring the bigger picture in retail to life. This isn't in a silo. It's not about delivering customer service to the customer on the front line or making sure your team are happy. It's actually a bigger piece. But I also think that makes the business, sustainable for the long term, which of course is what all retailers want. And I suppose on that then, what advice or tips would you give a retailer, or I suppose a retail leader listening, who wants to encourage their team to develop their human skills?
Well, I would say, first of all, the vision is really, really important. The vision of the store, the vision of the leader, the vision of the company itself. Because younger staff coming into retail now, they want to know, is there a sense of purpose? It's
Mm.
not just serving. Is there a greater sense of purpose here? Does this store, does it help people? Does it help, their mental health? Does it help, their living in the local community? Values are important, because more and more younger staff want to align their values to the retailer they're working with. And we're going to get more of that. And if we think the Gen Zs are demanding, well, be careful what's coming next, because
Yes.
the Generation Alphas are going to have that piece because they're being educated into it. So I think that part of it is important. I think management has to change. We've moved on from the 20th century command and control, where it was, I suppose, what we call in Ireland pale, male, and sometimes stale. That it's a different leadership, it's a different management now. you must, the employee must be recognized. They must feel that sense of purpose. And I suppose the other thing in retail is look outside of retail for your staff. Don't keep on asking the question, what experience do you have in retail? Maybe ask the question, what experience do you have with human skills? What are your human skills like? Don't sit down and maybe interview somebody over a table like we've done for the last three
Yeah.
years. Walk them around the store, leave them with the chef in behind the deli, or somebody else. Leave them for 5 minutes to see, do they stand there and not interact, or do they interact and ask questions of any kind. So recruiting on the basis of human skills, I think makes total sense. And we're seeing an awful lot of that. These are transversal skills. We're seeing people move from retail into other areas that they would not have thought, but they develop those human skills within retail. That's not what we want in retail. You want the opposite. So you want to be able to go to other sectors and recruit on the basis of a high level of emotional intelligence. Because I think we've used IQ for, again, hundreds of years as the only measurement, but most retailers would now say that it's in that area of emotional intelligence, but then understanding what emotional intelligence is and isn't is important too. So I think the human skills are just so important. I mean, if they constitute 50 to 55% of the skills of the future, it's a discussion we need to carry on having.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree there. I think there's such a bigger picture here to look out for retailers, and it really needs to be answered. So we could absolutely talk all day, as we normally do. But look, last question then for you, Charlie. What's next? What's coming up for you, for the team over the next few months?
Well, we've been very lucky, Melissa. I was telling you recently, we recently won 4 European Union Peace Plus projects, and we applied for all of them. So the Peace Plus is now in its 25th year. It followed on from the Good Friday Agreement, and it's about using what has been achieved in Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland border counties, of which Donegal is one of them, and where we can use the lessons of that past to leverage into the future, from an economic, social, and political point of view. So we would have applied for those tenders, of which are of 2 years work, but we've won 4 of them, and it's in the area of the human skills. So it's through music, through the arts, through the language, the Irish language, and where human skills weaves into that. And in 1 or 2 of the cases, we're doing a link up with Queen's University to create a certificate of completion there. So it's about making human skills into micro credentials in time. It's not about having a degree in human skills, but maybe having a series of micro credentials. So that's a big one. That's a big one for us in recent times. So even today, we're really excited in our place of work today. We've got Moya Brennan from Clonard coming in today because she's very, very interested. She's a fantastic program going here in West Donegal, which is promoting young songwriters onto stage. And through that, we're going to weave in the human skills interaction there and try and get Queen's University to help that singer-songwriter tell their story through this program, through this European Union Peace Plus program. So that's something that we're working on at the minute.
Oh, it's incredible and helping so many people as well. Well, look, before I let you go, The Future is Human, the brand new book, when's it out, Charlie?
It's out. I mean, we launch it physically on July the 4th, and that's nothing to do with my American connection. It's just that that's when the venue was available. But we'll obviously celebrate Independence Day that day. And then my belief is that from the 20th of June that it will be available on Amazon at that stage. So yeah, the 20th of June, if you keep an eye out, and I think Amazon at the minute are taking pre-orders for it as well. So that's really, really good. And it's very exciting. It's great to get to this stage because anybody that knows about writing a book and making sure your references and you're double checking and editing, it's a process. But no, we're looking forward to that.
Oh,
And
I'm thrilled.
thanks for the opportunity to come on here to promote it.
Not at all. Well, look, if you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, please do like and share it from any of the podcast platforms that you listen to with your network. And of course, if you're on social media, do tag me, Melissa Moore, and the Retail Tea Break podcast. Listen back to previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, do hit that follow button so you get to listen first every week. Do please, please, please connect with myself and Charlie over on LinkedIn. If you're not already following Charlie, why not? The storytelling, the stories, the photos, the insights that he shares are unbelievable. And of course, we'll also share the link to the book for the pre-orders and that Amazon link as soon as they come out, and we'll pop all that into the show notes. Charlie, it's a fabulous book. Massive, massive congratulations once again. It's been a pleasure to have you on today's episode. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.